And welcome back, footy fans, to another episode of Donnie's Disposals. I am your host, Coach Donnie Hess, here back with another VFL Vantage. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are here to talk the lovely, that is, the Victorian Football League. Both the men's and the women's competition are up and about. They are going. Joining me, as per usual, the man, the myth, the legend, that is Brendan Jonty Rhodes. Brendan, it is great to see you, sir.
A lot of people would use the middle term for me more often than not. I would have thought there. Yeah, fantastic, mate. How are things over in good old USA? Have you got all your free soccer tickets yet?
I'm not in one of those cities that's anywhere. I think Kansas City is the closest one to me, and I'm not even going anywhere near that. So I will enjoy it. I know it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun when Australia play the USA. I know when the draw came out, I almost put something out to go to ask a few of my Aussies to go. I got weird split loyalties in this one for sure, but no, I'm excited. No, but we are here to talk footy. We are here to talk the great game that is Aussie rules football and both of the men's and the women's competition in Victoria. Since the last time that we have talked, rounds 8 through 10 in the men and the first one through round three have happened in the women's. Really quickly, Brendan, your thoughts on the footy that we've experienced over the last 3 weeks?
It's been unbelievable, especially on the weekend just gone, which we'll get to later on, and I'm sure you'll talk when you do the waffle chat as well, that some of the lower ranked teams beating the higher ranked teams just shows that our competitions are unbelievably even, and that just about anyone can beat anyone on the day. We've got one clear out, and we've got three who are probably gone in the VFL. In the VFLW, well, we've got the three standouts who I predicted. I'm very, very wrong in the VFL, so don't think I'm skiting. But the three standouts I predicted in the VFLW look like they're about to clear out already, and and probably there's a couple in the VFLW that we thought might find it a little bit tougher, and that's how it's turning out so far.
All right. Well, since the women have started and we are gentlemen here, sir, let's start with the ladies football. We'll start off round one as we see Carlton knock off Darebin 50-33. North Melbourne again keep their dominance going with a win over Port Melbourne 62-18. The Sandy Zebras with an impressive 3-point win over the Bombers 41-38. Williamstown get a win over the Cats 75-20. Unfortunately, Casey play spoilers down in Hobart as the Tassie Devils fall in their first game ever 54-29, and the Collingwood Magpies with an impressive win at Box Hill, beating the Hawks 64-37. I mean, a cracker, but let's go to it. Probably the most competitive game has to be the Zebras getting a win over the Bombers.
It's a really interesting one with Sandringham. You never really know what to expect. They could finish anywhere between fourth and 10th on the ladder, because their absolute best is good enough to challenge probably anyone but the top team. I would say probably anyone but the top team. And we see in round two that they did challenge one of the teams that I have as a top side. 41 is a big score for Sandringham. That's been their biggest issue in the past, is not being able to score, and that's why they sometimes get beaten by some of the teams that they shouldn't lose to. This was a ripping game. Essendon kicked 2 goals in the first quarter to nothing. Then Sandy kicked 4 in the second. It was level at half time. Neither team managed a goal in the third quarter, and that's probably where the difference was. Essendon's turn with the wind only yielded 4 points. And then in the last quarter, it was 2 goals to 1, and Sandringham found themselves in front at the end due to a late goal from Taylor Kearns, the star forward, 14th minute. Then they had a couple more chances to seal it unsuccessfully, which kept things pretty interesting. But yes, a terrific win for the Zebras, and a great start to the season.
Definitely, for sure. And not to be outdone, round two gives us just as many fireworks as we start off as Collingwood go on the road and edge out the Zebras 27-26 at Trevor Barker Oval. North get an impressive win over Carleton 72-40. Box Hill survive a visit to Williamstown with a 27-26 win. Port Melbourne get a win over the Darebin Falcons 35-32. The Cats bounce back from the first round loss to get a win at Windy Hill over the Bombers 32-12. And the Western Bulldogs get a win over KC 41-18. But I mean, I don't know which one to go to first. The 1 point thriller between Collingwood and Sandringham, the 1 point thriller between Box Hill and the Williamstown Seagulls, or the 3 point one at ETU Stadium between the Borough and the Falcons.
We can quickly touch on them all because they all have big ramifications, even though it's only round two. As I just said, Sandringham has the ability to challenge the top sides. Collingwood is one of those top sides. They pushed them to 1 point, both teams kicking a lot of points, 3-9 to 3-8 in that game. But it's the Zebras' inability to score when they have the chance that I just touched on that makes a big difference. And Collingwood get out of jail there. Williamstown is one of the big three for mine. Box Hill probably sits fourth. So it's no surprise, but it's a great result for the Hawks to bounce back from a bad loss to the Magpies at home to get a big win away by a point. Darebin showed that even though we feel that they're probably going to drop off a little bit this year, that they're not going to be too far away with their best footy. The big one for mine was Geelong, who have struggled for probably 2 years in this competition, and Essendon, they just have the ability to turn in an absolute stinker. And in 2024, in round one, they kicked 0-7 against Port Melbourne. They bounced back and beat Port later in that season, amazingly. Last year in round nine, I think it was, they kicked 0-11 against Williamstown. And this time they've kicked 0-12 against a team that they really should have been expecting to beat. So if you can't kick straight, you're not going to win. Bad kicking is bad football, and that was a terrific result for Geelong away from home to show that they're heading in the right direction after a couple of struggling seasons.
Definitely, for sure. Let's move to round three. And unfortunately, competitive might not be a word we'll use in this round, as just the results are insane. We'll start off with Williamstown Seagulls with a 53-point win over Essendon, 69-16. Collingwood says, "Hold my beer. We'll make it even better," with an 83-point win over the Western Bulldogs, 85-2. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, an entire game of football on 2 points. Oh boy. North Melbourne gets a win over Darebin, 62-28. Carlton get a 12-point win over the Zebras, 36-24. And Port Melbourne get a win over the Tassie Devils, 72-47. Unfortunately, as I said, this round was not exactly the most competitive round of footy.
No, I saw two of these games. I had the responsibility of calling the game between Collingwood and the Western Bulldog. Well, those 2 points that you mentioned,
Oh boy.
they came in the 16th and the 18th minutes of the last quarter.
Oh
So,
boy.
so 16 minutes into the final quarter, the Bulldogs had not scored, and in fact, that entire time had only had 2 shots at goal, for one out on the full and one that fell short. They had 2 shots in the last 4 minutes, all from Mary Sandrell. Mary Sandrell managed all 4 of those shots for 2 points, one out on the full and one that failed to score. But it was more about Collingwood. We saw that they were challenged by Sandringham the week before. They responded in the best way they have ever responded. 85 is their highest ever score in the VFLW, 120 odd games they've played. 83, their biggest winning margin. Both those records were previously set against the Bulldogs back in 2019. So that tells you how much their dominance was in this game. Amelia Peck, 4 goals, probably could have kicked 5. Dom Carboni, though, the Lambert Pearce medalist of 2024, the former Bulldogs captain, the captain, the Bulldogs grand final in 24, captain Collingwood's grand final in 2025. She was absolutely unstoppable, playing mainly as a forward. 24 touches, 3 goals, 1. Just absolutely brilliant. She was on that day. Williamstown, and bouncing back from that shock loss, really making a statement against Essendon. Carlton's win over Sandringham is probably the most meritorious there, winning by a couple of goals at home against the Zebras, who once again found it tough to score against a team that they probably should be beating. And the Port Melbourne Tasmania game, I saw half of that when I arrived on Sunday to watch the VFL, and that was one of the best VFLW games you would want to see. There was absolutely nothing between them for 3 quarters. It was a 9-point lead for Port at 3-quarter time. Tassie kicked the first 2 goals of the last quarter and actually took the lead. And then Port went bang and kicked 5 goals in about the next 8 minutes and put the game to bed. A 25-point win. It's Port Melbourne's highest ever home score, but it certainly wasn't indicative of the game. And Tassie would have come away from that thinking, well, yes, we can compete in our first season in the VFLW.
Definitely, for sure. So that is all for the 3 rounds of the women's. Let's hop over to the men's. Again, round 8 through 10. We will review. We'll start off round 8 as the Geelong Cats get a big win on the road at Brighton Homes Arena, 115-49 over the Brisbane Lions. The Sydney Swans with an impressive 52-point win over the Collingwood Magpies, 126-74. Box Hill escape a scare at home, getting a 1-point win over the Richmond Tigers, 83-82. The Frankston Dolphins go up to Queensland with a nice 39-point win over the Suns, 122-83. Southport come down to North Hobart Oval and spoil the Tassie Devils with a 53-point win, 130-77. Carlton with an impressive 20-point win over the Footscray Bulldogs, 117-97. St. Kilda with a 48-point victory over the Casey Demons, 105-57. Port Melbourne with a nice 13-point win over North Melbourne, 103-90. And to end the round, to hold my beers, GWS and the Sandy Zebras play in a classic as the Giants escape with a 3-point win, 87-84. A couple of classics here. GWS, Sandy, and a Box Hill Richmond Tigers match is absolutely classic couple of games of footy.
Absolute daylight robbery this one was at Box Hill City Oval. The Hawks returning home for the first time after the resurfacing. They still haven't got their facilities up and running, but Richmond, due to the injuries, which I'm sure even the AFL followers over in the USA would know, they are absolutely racked by injuries at the moment. And in this game, they fielded 0 AFL listed players, the Tigers. So against one of the premiership contenders, we went into this game thinking 60 points, 80 points. And Rich, apart from a couple of, there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there was 8 or 9 lead changes in the game, but Richmond was in control with the spirit and heart of VFL listed players who are just desperate to make an impression. They led by 18 points at the 22-minute mark of the last quarter, the Tigers. And then Box Hill came home with a rush. A goal from a couple of quick goals from Jack Dalton and Kai de Clace. Richmond got one back through Rye Cantwell, still led by 12 at the 26-minute mark. A point to Matt Hill, brought it back to 11. Ollie Greaves brought it back to 5. And then a free kick for Jack Dalton. His second goal in the time on period went through seconds before the siren. Box Hill win the game. They just have an unbelievable way of getting over the line in close games. We saw it in the finals against the Brisbane Lions last year with the last kick of the game. They're just never beaten. And absolute heartbreak for Richmond, but a crucial escape for Box Hill. And then in the Sandringham-Geelong game, GWS game, that was very similar. There was nothing in it all day. It was a 1-point lead to the Zebras at 3-quarter time. And then they got themselves out. They kicked the first 3 goals of the last quarter and got themselves out by 17 points. GWS fought back. They took the lead at the 16-minute mark. Sandy then kicked 2 more goals and looked like they might have pinched it. Jack Ferraro at the 26 minutes. It took them about it took GWS about 90 seconds to get it back. And Riley Hamilton, academy product, first year player, takes a great mark beside the point post and snaps it through at the 28-minute mark to steal victory for the higher ranked side against the desperate but slightly under resourced home team.
Definitely, for sure. Love classic games like that. Let's move on to round nine, where Box Hill escape another scare, this time at Williamstown, getting a win over the Seagulls 94-89. Essendon with a win over Richmond 107-89. Southport return home to Queensland and get a win over Port Melbourne 110-78. Werribee with an impressive 31-point win over the Collingwood Magpies 126-95. Geelong beat the Sydney Swans by 14, 90-76. North Melbourne continued the pain for the Gold Coast Suns with a 13-point win, 90-77. Kinetic Stadium sees a cracker as an 8-point win by the Zebras, 60-52. KC Demons and Footscray play in a score fest as a 136-101 win for the Demons. Coburg get a win over Carlton, 110-74. And GWS beat the Lions by 30, 102-72. I mean, Box Hill escapes another scare this round.
What did I say about Box Hill and just finding a way to win these close games? Hawthorn is the same. They're AFL team. They just find a way to win, apart or pinch a draw as they did against Collingwood a few weeks ago with that goal after the siren. They had this one under control though. Box Hill. They led by 25 points early in the last quarter. Williamstown came charging back and actually managed to level the scores right at the death. Braden Pruce kicked a goal at the 28-minute mark that leveled the scores. We might have been going to get away with a draw, but Will McCabe, it was this time, found a goal at the 29.5-minute mark to regain that one-goal lead. And then just typically for the day, Hugo Hall-Kahan, who we're now all talking about as making his debut for Adelaide this week, had one last chance to pinch the draw at the 32.5-minute mark, kicked it behind, which was the story of Williamstown's day. 11 goals, 23 is why Williamstown lost this game of football. And Box Hill get over the line once more.
Another get out of jail free card for the Hawks. Let's move to round 10, the last round that has played. We'll start off as the Richmond Tigers get a win up in Sydney, 80-68. The Cats with a 50-point win over the Blues, 131-81. St. Kilda with a win. Finally, Box Hill cannot hold on, and they finally drop a game, 92-58. The Footscray Bulldogs with a 20-point win over Collingwood, 92-72. KC Demons knock off the GWS Giants by 14, 77-63. An absolute score fest up in Brighton Homes Arena in Brisbane as the Dolphins get a big road win, 135-108. Werribee and Essendon go, you want to know what? We'll do just the same with a 174-114 win by the Tigers. Coburg get a win over the Seagulls, 91-73. But the game I want to talk about this round is this 4-point thriller at ETU Stadium as the Borough just edge over the Devils, 104-100.
One of the games of the season, and as I touched on earlier, I was lucky enough to not call it. I wasn't lucky enough to call it, but I was lucky enough to be in the grandstand watching this one. And what a game of football it was! Nothing between them. Pretty much a shootout from the start. 6-5 for the Borough in the first quarter. And then Tassie seemed to take control. They kicked 5-1 in the second term. They had a 22-point lead at halftime and looked like they were in control, looked like they were going to come away with it. Then the game flipped again in the third term. It was tight. The lead was being held by the Devils till about the midway point. And then Kane Baldwin decided to insert himself. He'd already kicked a couple, 3 goals in the first half. He kicked 2 in time on of the third quarter. Port Melbourne booting 4 goals to 1 in that period of time. And then Baldwin's goal after the siren leveled it up at the final change and was set for an absolute classic last quarter. and a classic last quarter is what we got. Tasmania definitely had their chances. They sprayed a couple that they probably should have kicked, but Port Melbourne's desperate defence was just as important. On face value, Tassie has kicked 2 goals, 8 to Port Melbourne's 4 straight in the last term. For 8 of those 8 behinds, 4 of them were rushed by desperate defence. So that sort of balances it out a little bit. And then right at the end, it was Baldwin again who kicked the winning goal at the 28.5-minute mark of the last quarter. Tassie had 2 chances to get it back with a snapped behind and then a rushed one right at the death as Port held on to win the Bill Withers Cup. The second time we've seen teams double up this season. Amazingly, in a 22-team comp with 18 rounds, we've got teams playing each other twice before round 10. That was Casey and Footscray in round 9, and then this one in round 10. But the vagaries of a fixture, we could talk about it until we're blue in the face. But Kane Baldwin finishing with 6 goals here. He had no luck when he was at Essendon with injuries, and but a brilliant performance when the next best on the ground was 23. Tassie showing that even though they've lost, I think they've only won 1 of their last 5 games now, 1 and a draw. They're still a major player, and they're going to get those wins happening again. They've dropped out of the top 10 for the first time, but I'm certainly not worried about them just yet.
Yeah, still, yep. Only halfway through the year, so still some time, but it'll definitely be interesting. So that is all the games that we need to talk about.
As for the shootouts,
Oop, go ahead. Sorry.
I did want to touch on the shootouts. Sorry,
Sure,
a little bit of a pause there. I apologise. The shootouts were unbelievable. Werribee 27-12, 174 against Essendon 18-6, 114. What a game this was. 7 goals in the first quarter, 4 in the second, 11 goals in the third quarter from the Tigers, and then 5 in the last, while Essendon kicked 2, 8, 2, and 6. So Werribee's highest ever score against Essendon, and I think they've played 60 odd times in their history, and not quite their biggest winning margin because of the way Essendon scored, but just an amazing performance. Brady Wright kicked 4 goals in 7.5 minutes during this game in the third quarter, and 6 for the game for Werribee. So that was just a crazy scoreline to follow. It was on at the same time as the Port Tasmania game, so it was amazing to watch. And then Frankston, well, I don't know what to make of Frankston. In this 3-week block, they've gone to Queensland twice and won easily against the Suns and the Lions, who I'm absolutely dumbfounded that they're struggling, that those two teams are struggling. In between, they choked on a 5-goal, 3-quarter time lead and lost at home to Sandringham by kicking 6-16. So they host Southport this Saturday. I'm lucky enough to be calling that one. We'll talk about that a bit later on. But which Frankston is going to turn up? It's going to have to be the good one, or they'll get it handed to them again.
No, it's definitely interesting. Frankston's one of those I keep an eye on it. I went through the round. I was like, seriously? So definitely for sure. Well, that, like I said, that is all of the rounds that have played. Again, we're trying to do smaller chunks so Brendan doesn't have to try to remember. So we'll hop on to the burning questions. We'll start with the women's side. And for me, it's the extremes that I want to talk about really quickly, Brendan, because 3 rounds in, we have 2 unbeaten teams and 3 teams with no wins. So I ask you, which are you going to keep your eye on as we go on? The track to stay unbeaten or the track to get their first win? Which do you think for you has got you more intrigued?
I always love it when teams that haven't won get over the line. I think I've said here before that I grew up at a club up in the country where we hardly ever won. Like in my under 16s career, I won 2 games in my first 4 years. So I know what it's like to be in a struggling team. And in those 4 years, I think the reserves and senior teams wouldn't have won any more games than that. So So I always keep an eye on that. So they're the ones to watch. Darabin, who we predicted would drop off a little bit with some key and experienced retirements. They're not as far away as we said. They could have beaten Port Melbourne. They've played North Melbourne Werribee already on the weekend and were reasonably competitive. They lost by 5 goals. And they pushed Car. They'd beaten them 3 or 4 times in a row before that. So that's the one that would hurt them. Tasmania would be most disappointed with the home loss first up to the Casey Demons, last year's Wooden Spooners. But they showed in their trip across Bass Strait to play Port Melbourne that they're not hopeless. They're not that far away. And Essendon is the surprise for me to be 0-3. They're always around the mark. They're always in that sort of middle to bottom part of the top 6. They have played though, the Bombers, the loss to Sandringham in round 1, and the loss to Geelong. They're the two. Sandringham's a 50-50 game. Geelong they would have expected to beat, and they didn't kick a goal, and then they were thrashed by Williamstown. So there's plenty of time for them to recover. But right now, the watch is on Essendon. And at the top end of the ladder, well, Collingwood's destruction of the Bulldogs, as we said, has leapfrogged them over North Melbourne Werribee on percentage. And I actually heard comments in some areas that that North Melbourne has potentially shown some vulnerability and a potential that they might be going to get beaten, because I'm assuming that's because they lost a spot on the ladder,
Mm-hmm.
but
Wow.
they've won by 44 points over Port Melbourne, points over Darebin, in a competition that historically doesn't have high scores, and that 62 points against Darebin is their highest ever score against the Falcons.
Mm-hmm.
There's absolutely nothing to worry about if you're a Kangaroo supporter.
Nope.
You
Nope.
are still not going to lose a game until you lose a game. Collingwood is a terrific team, the last year's grand finalists, and they're a very viable challenger. But until they beat North Melbourne twice last year.
Mm-hmm.
But when it really matters, you're not winning the premiership unless you go through the Kangaroos.
Yep, 100% on that one. Let's jump to the men's, where with the men's, I got to talk about the top of the ladder leaders, because I think you and I both would sit here and go, were we expecting 9 games into the season to see the Cats at the top of the table? So the Cats sit 2 games clear. They have a 2-game lead on GWS in second place. Are they looking like the best team in the comp so far, or is there still too early to call this one? Because again, most teams have played 9 or 8 games except Gold Coast are the only one. They played 7, but other than that, everybody's played at least 8 games. Cats are sitting 2 games clear.
On face value and at the start of the season, the answer was no. But obviously, with 22 teams, 35 if you count the VFLW to keep my eye on, I missed something there. Geelong's fitness in the midfield at both levels is the big difference. They have 6 starting midfielders, 6 players who could start on the ball at the start of the game at the first bounce, who would be playing AFL football at probably half the competition. I'm talking Jack Bowes, who's played 149, got dropped after 149 AFL games,
Mhm.
is averaging 35 disposals. Last week he only had 28, but he kicked
Mhm.
3 goals as well. I'm talking James Wapple, who's played over 150 AFL games. And the young guns, George Stevens, Mitch Nevitt, Ollie Wiltshire, who's been forced into the forward line and is kicking 3 goals a game. Hunter Holmes, the younger brother of Max, on the way up. I think I said Mitch Nevitt. There's half a
Yep.
dozen of them there. Then they've got the ruckman. Joe Pike hasn't played an AFL game yet, but would certainly be probably 25 games in at a couple of other clubs. And Reece Stanley has played 230 AFL games as the starting ruckman in the VFL. It's with a squad like that and a healthy list, um, they're going to take a power of beating right now, and
Mm-hmm.
things can change in a long season. 9 games, they're halfway through their season, 18 home and away games, uh, but them sitting 2 games clear with a percentage of 156
56.
116, so it's 40%.
Yep.
That's an extra 2 games on top of that.
Yep.
So they've definitely cleared out, and the fact that right down to, I'm going to say, 20th below them are capable of beating anybody on their day means that it's hard to see them actually getting caught for the minor
Mm-hmm.
premiership, and
Yeah.
it's a finals thing to try and run them down.
Yeah. No, I was looking at it like they are literally in that. I know they talk about the championship window in the AFL all the time. Offense, defense, best offense, 965 points this season. I mean, I think the next closest is their second is third in the ladder at Box Hill at 879, so almost 100 points below, and they've only given up 618 points, which the next closest one is 675. So, like, they're doing it not only offensively but defensively too. So I agree with you. It's the health. I think the biggest question will be is the health of the midfield up in AFL level is going to depict how good this Cats team would be, because as long as they stay healthy, Bose, Warple, uh, some of these guys that are down there, I mean, they may stay down there because the the AFL team is playing pretty darn good footy as well. So no, it's absolutely insane. But I remember looking at that, I was just like, you've got to be kidding me with how good this Cats team is playing right now. And like I said, it's hard to see GWS, Box Hill, Werribee, who are right there catching them before the end of the season, even with still 9 games still to play for all of these teams. So now we want to be expedient because I want to make sure Brendan gets to work on time because I felt bad the last time. So let's jump to the tipping. We will start with the women's. We will do round 4 for the women's as I pull it up here because I was looking at the ladder. So here we go. We will start off round 4, first game of the round sees Victoria Park sees Collingwood take on the Casey Demons. Collingwood, Casey, who do you like?
Uh, Casey, I don't think can push Collingwood here. Put simply, the Magpies and the Demons play each other, I think, across pretty much all the grades across the King's birthday weekend. Based on what I saw from Collingwood last week, um, there's probably only a couple teams that can chase them, and Casey's going to find it tough. So Collingwood to win easily.
Yeah, pies for me, just a little too much, but we'll definitely see. Hoping for a cracker on that one. Wilson, Trevor Barker Beach Oval sees the Sandy Zebras take on Geelong in this one. This is an intriguing game, mid-table for both of these teams. Who do you like in this one? Zebras, Cats.
Absolutely intriguing because Geelong has shown in that trip to Essendon a couple of weeks ago that if you aren't on your game, they can turn you over. But you've got to pick Sandringham. You think um, even with their struggles sometimes in front of goal, they should have too much firepower for Geelong at home.
Yep, I'm gonna go with you on that one. Give me the Zebras on that one. Fun one at Preston City Oval as the Falcons host the Western Bulldogs in this one. I'm gonna tip the Falcons. It's my little pet peeve that I will have this year. I like tipping the Falcons just because I really want them to get off the schneid. Give me the Falcons for me.
Yeah, tough one, isn't it?
Yep.
Neither team has won a game. Sorry, the Bulldogs have won a game. They had a really good win over Casey in round 2 out at Casey. So if they bring that form, then they'll beat Darabin. But if they bring the form that they played against Collingwood, and admittedly Collingwood is a much higher quality team than Darabin is right now, then the Falcons will win because they couldn't just not score. They couldn't even get the ball for long periods of time against Collingwood. So um, I'm going to lean towards the Falcons, um, only because it's at home.
Yep. That one's a coin toss. I'm fully with you on that one. Let's jump down North Hobart Oval. Tassie Devils, welcome to the VFLW moment as they face the powerful North Melbourne Werribee Kangaroos. Ruse for me on this one. Hoping the Devils can give it a crack, but I worry this is a welcome to the VFLW moment.
I think it is. I absolutely think it is. They'll give some cheek. They'll be around the place for a while. They've got a lot of spirit. They move the ball well. They take good marks and they use the ball quite well for a team that a lot of which hasn't played at a higher level at this higher level yet. But this isn't VFLW. This is the next level above, and I think they'll find that out against North Melbourne Werribee. Having said that, there are quite a few Tassie girls who have spent time in the North Melbourne program through the Kangaroos alignment with Tasmania. I think there's 4 or 5 that have played a game or two over the past 3 years for North Melbourne as top up players. So they'll know a little bit about how the Kangaroos play, but I can't see them getting anywhere near them.
Yeah, I hope so. I really hope Tassie gives them a competitive shot, but the Rouge are just so good. So this I think could be a really good one. Windy Hill, Essendon still winless, taking on Carlton, a fascinating one. Can the Essendon get that first W of the season, or will Carlton continue to add to the pain of the Bombers? Who do you like? Bombers, Blues.
Absolutely, Essendon can win. Um, see, there's those rivalry games, and we've got the biggest one of all that we're about to talk about next.
Hmm.
When you just see that opposition club's Guernsey, and you say, "We're on here, and we're just going to go hell for leather," and this is one of those. Essendon and Carlton, they don't like each other at all. Um, you on exposed form, you've got to think that Carlton wins, but it certainly wouldn't surprise me to follow this on Sunday and see the Bombers kick straight and find a way and get the job done. But Carlton will be the tip.
Yeah, I will. I'm going to tip Essendon just because I want them to get their season going with it. I agree with you. I would, my rational brain will tip Carlton, but I'm going to tip Essendon just for shits and giggles in this point because I want to see them get on the board and get going up the ladder. And as you said, the heated rivalry here. Cannot wait one for this. Port Melbourne, Williamstown at ETU Stadium, a cracking game here. Who do you like in this one?
Well, the women's version of this football has only been around for a few years, but the men have played, I think, 260 times since 1875, and it's just a rivalry. It's probably, well, it is. I mean, it's the oldest rivalry, genuine rivalry in football, dating back to the 1870s. At women's level, obviously, it's only been 6 or 7 years. What Port Melbourne showed me against Tasmania is that they move the ball beautifully and they can score very quickly. So they're extremely dangerous, and they do have a habit of beating Williamstown when you don't expect them to either. The Seagulls are one of my top 3 picks. So just on that, you'd think that I'd have to go for Williamstown. So it'll be the Seagulls will be the tip, but it'll be a very very close game, and Port Melbourne will be in it right to the death.
Yeah, I was gonna go form. Give me the Seagulls, but I think this will be a cracker. Port Melbourne will give it a good old fashioned crack. Cannot wait for that one. So that is all of the women's games tips. Let's jump over to round 11 over at the men. North Hobart Oval is where we will start as the Devils take on North Melbourne in this one. Who do you like in this one? Devils Ruse.
Another one of those ones where the players will be still wiping the sleep from their eyes when they run out at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, Tasmania to bounce back for me. I think at home, uh, they haven't really been off apart from that game against Southport when they were good for 2.5 quarters and then just got blown away at the end. I think their class around the ground, even without their two mid-season draftees, should be too much. So the Devils to win by around about 4 goals for mine.
Yep, I was going to tip the Devils at home cooking on that one, but that should be a fun one. This one should be a cracking game. Cannot wait for this one as the aquatic animal fight as we have as the Frankston Dolphins take on Southport down at Kinetic Stadium in this one. Give me the Dolphins on this one. Southport's been a little bit inconsistent for me. I like the Dolphins. I'm hoping that maybe they can use the form that they've been playing in Queensland. Maybe because they're playing a Queensland team, maybe they'll think they're in Queensland. So I'm going to go with Frankston on this one, but I worry Southport is very good.
Southport is very, very good. Frankston is very good at home. The key thing here to think about is that it is not the classic Frankston night game
Yep.
that they are usually so good at. Putting aside the terrible result against Sandringham, who they always have trouble with in the Bayside Derby down there. Frankston's best football wins at home, but Southport has found a way over and over again to not just beat Frankston, but belt Frankston. Um, Frankston had never beaten the Brisbane Lions before last week. They've never beaten Southport. The Sharks have lost a couple of very, very key players in the last 3 weeks. I think I've called them here in the past the three musketeers, the three superstars in the midfield of Jacob Dawson, Boyd Woodcock, and Jesse Joyce. Jesse Joyce did his knee 3 weeks ago and he's out for the season. Boyd Woodcock did his knee 2 weeks ago and he's out for the season. So that's really going to hurt them. I think Southport should still have the class to get over the line against Frankston, but as you said, if the Dolphins bring what they took to Queensland in 2 of the last 3 games, then they are every chance.
Mhm. Yep. That should be a cracking one there. Let's head up to Victoria Park in Melbourne as the Collingwood Magpies host the KC Demons in this one. These Pies, who do you like?
Interesting. This game is usually a Casey home game on the King's birthday weekend, but back at Victoria Park, Collingwood is one of the 3 big disappointments of the season for me. I mean, last time we spoke, I said they were a genuine top 4 team. They'd come off an absolute classic against Box Hill. Well, they haven't won since. They've lost 5 games in a row now. They're sitting 20th on the ladder. They're 2-7. It's going to take 10 wins to make the finals. So they've only got one more loss up their sleeve if they want any chance to play in the finals. Casey has turned their season around after a couple of absolute stinkers. They've beaten the reigning premiers Footscray at home, and then last week they had another great victory as well. So they've against GWS, who are second on the ladder. So exposed form says Casey, but Collingwood wasn't bad against Footscray, who had lost 4 games in a row as well before last week. This is really a last roll of the dice stuff for the Magpies, and for that reason, I'm going to tip them to get over the line and break the losing streak and keep their season alive.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Give me the D. Give me the D's on this one. I just think that there's still so many injuries in AFL level that there's the inconsistency. I think is drowning down into VFL level. So give me the D's on this one. I'm going to be frank in this one. The Q Clash Light, as I have labeled all of the derbies when it comes to their seconds playing in state league competitions. So the Q Clash Light, Gold Coast versus Brisbane. Pardon my French here, Brendan. Who gets their shit together in this one?
You don't need to pardon the French because they're saying because we're asking that question in every single language around the world. I have no idea what has happened to these 2 teams. Gold Coast tipped in the top 4. Brisbane Lions tipped in the top 6, having made 3 preliminary finals and 2 semis in the past 5 years, I think it was, or 3 prelims and a semi in the past 4 years. They've won 2 games between them. They've got the 2 biggest fortresses in the league where they just don't lose, and they're not just losing there; they're getting flogged there, both of them. So, what the hell is going on with these 2 teams? their seasons. They're both sitting on, or Gold Coast sitting at 1-6, Brisbane Lions sitting at 1-7. As I said, they've got to get to a minimum of 10-8 if they're going to make the finals. So Brisbane loses this, then they've got no room to move. Gold Coast would still have one, but realistically, they're both cooked.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm going for the Lions, but that is because they have shown more ability to score in their losses than Gold Coast has. But that's the only reason.
Yeah, I know. It's this is a coin flip of the worst variety here on this one. I'll take the Sunnies. They're at home. I don't take much solace. I'm just gonna go the home team on this one. But like I said, I'm hoping both of these teams finally pull their heads out of a body cavity. I will not say on this podcast for sure. So let's hop down to Box Hill where
I
we see
don't
the
think you have to say to. I don't think you have to
We'll
say
hawk,
we know. We know.
yeah, we'll hop down to Box Hill where we see the Hawks take on the Footscray Bulldogs again. The Hawks this 3 game set, unfortunately, two escapes and then finally fell. Still third on the ladder. Hawks, Bulldogs, who do you like?
Right now, Box Hill is one player away, potentially one player away from having their entire AFL list fit and available. They've got 2 players listed as tests and one that is a week away. So that makes them extremely powerful. Footscray had lost 4 games in a row with injuries. They're starting to get a couple of back. Cody Waitman is likely to play his first game in 20 months at one of the 2 levels. The talk is probably at AFL level, which I think is a massive risk, but that's why they get paid the big dollars and I don't. Uh, um, if he does play at AFL level, that pushes someone back down. I know I really find it hard to pick against Box Hill Hawks at home, and they have a great record there. Um, I will pick the Hawks, but Footscray just showed some signs against Collingwood last week, and once they do get themselves fully up and rolling, then they could very easily string together 10 or 12 wins in a row, and a win in a game like this would be just the catalyst to do that. So it wouldn't surprise me at all to see Footscray get up.
Yeah, give me the Hawks on this one. I think that the hometown, the home advantage, but I agree it's Footscray. I am hoping Cody Waitman starts off in the VFL because it is a huge risk to hop up into the AFL, but I can understand it. Will Day did a test down in VFL and then went straight up, so we'll definitely have to see. I think this next one is a sneaky game of the round for me.
Oh, yeah.
Werribee versus Coburg, Melbourne Avalon Airport Oval, and Werribee a cracking one in this one. Give me the Tigers at home, but I love this Coburg Lions team. I think they're playing some cracking football right now.
They are. They're absolutely on fire, Coburg. And by cracking football right now, we're talking cracking football right now. Last week against Williamstown was their 4th win in a row. The last time Coburg won 4 games in a row was the first 4 games of 2015. So that tells you how well that they are going. Werribee's coming off 27 goals in a game. And Coburg, as good as Coburg is and as good as Coburg is playing, I don't think they have the ability to do that. They have to stop the Werribee forward line and midfield from getting away. The midfield battle is going to be amazing. The experience on both sides is brilliant. It's Werribee at home is my tip, but this is a game that, well, I'll be certainly tuning into the last 40 minutes or so of it. Or actually, what have I got? 2 hours difference between the end of my call, so I'll be able to tune into probably the last 2.5 quarters of it, and I'll certainly be doing that on my way home from on Frankston on Saturday.
Hmm. Definitely for sure. I'm gonna tip Werribee again at home, but like I said, that one sneakily could be game of the round with those two both playing some really good football. Let's head out to Trevor Barker Beach Oval as the Zebras take on the top of the table Cats. as much as I'd love for the Zebras to throw a little wrench in this top of the ladder, I think the Cats are just too good right now. Give me the Cats.
Yeah, the spirit of Sandringham can never be questioned. And at home, they are putting up some great efforts. They push the Giants, they push Sandringham, they push St Kilda. This is another level. They've got a great. They've beaten Geelong a couple of times in recent years at home when they've had no right to do so on paper. But surely Geelong goes to Sandy and has a win.
Yep, definitely for sure. Let's move on up to Tramway Oval up in Sydney as the Swans host the Saints. An interesting one here. The injury issues are starting to mount up. Hopefully, it looks like the AFL side for the Sydney Swans are getting a couple. Should get potentially Cal Mills and Malcolm Roses back for this week, which I think then could potentially send a Caden Cleary back down potentially. Will Brody Grundy play? So there's a few questions. So your thoughts on this one? I'm going to tip Sydney because I have a feeling Grundy back in. I think Laddams comes right back out. Laddams goes back down. I think the Swans getting a few soldiers back into the VFL, I think will be good, but it could be a cracking game against the Saints.
Yeah, Grundy definitely comes back in. St Kilda's ruck strength is too strong at AFL level for them not to bring him back for this one, which does push either Laddams or McLean or both out, and you out of the AFL team, and both of them would be absolutely dead stiff.
Mm-hmm.
McLean kicked 4 goals in his 100th game, and
Yep.
and Laddams picked up a coach's vote for his brilliant performance in the ruck. So
And 102
whoever
fantasy points.
whoever gets forced out, and he did the same thing last year. He had 20 touches and 35 hitouts in the one game that Brody Grundy missed, but had to
Yep.
go straight back out because Brody Grundy is the big dog and
Mm-hmm.
doesn't need a full time ruckman as support. Um, It'll be interesting to see how the Swans structure up if they in the AFL if they still want to go with the four talls that they did against Richmond as to whether it's one or two come back down. But yeah, for that reason, Sydney's had their wobbly boot on in the VFL. They lost to Geelong at Geelong, which is no
Mm-hmm.
problem at all. But getting beaten by an undermanned Richmond at home last week is something that I'm sure Nick Malcheski would have read them the riot act over. And
Mm-hmm.
even though the Saints are in form with 3 wins in a row, the Swans shouldn't be losing another game like this if they're a fair dinkum.
Yep, no, 100% on that one. Let's jump to Windy Hill as we see the Bombers take on the Blues at Windy Hill. Fascinating one for you on this one. Don's Blues, who do you like?
Couple of narrow losses in the last couple of weeks for Carlton. They don't worry me. They're in reasonably good form. They fell short against Coburg, who are red hot, and then they got beaten by Geelong. Essendon showed they could kick a big score against Werribee, but they shipped 27 goals. And heartbreak. We've got to touch on the heartbreak too. Lewis Hayes made his comeback from a knee injury for Essendon, his first game in 12 months in that game against Werribee. Unfortunately, the knee's gone again. So he's facing another 12 months on the sidelines. As is Melbourne's Andy Moniz Wakefield, who missed all of last season with a knee reconstruction. He has also re-injured his knee on the weekend. So our hearts and thoughts go out to Andy Moniz Wakefield and Lewis Hayes. But no, I think Carlton. I think Carlton bounces back and wins this pretty easily.
Yeah, definitely. And then, as we said, the rivalry among rivalries in the VFL is Port Melbourne take on Williamstown at ETU Stadium, cracking one on this one. The old rivals match again. The Borough, the Seagulls, who do you like?
The Johnson Callahan Cup, the time-honoured clash. Port Melbourne in brilliant form, 4 wins out of their last 5 games. They're on the cusp of the top 10. Williamstown uh, have slid a little bit, a disappointing loss to Coburg last week. They wouldn't have been happy with that after also going down to Box Hill. They've got to reset after losing Joel Fitzgerald and Hugo Hall-Kahan in the mid-season draft. They're big losses for Williamstown's midfield. Can they respond? Yes, they can. Will the sight of that red and blue Guernsey fire them up and get them going? Yes, it will. Will it be enough to win? I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say Williamstown, but it's always a 50-50 game. Even if one's at the top, one's at the bottom, you can't pick this one with confidence.
Yeah, I'm gonna go the Seagulls in this one, but I think it should be an absolutely cracking game. Well, Brendan, that is it. That is all games tipped, all games covered, and thankfully we didn't have a massive internet issue this time. We had a couple of little points here, but it actually for the most part has gone well. So again, Brendan, thank you so much for hopping on the podcast again. Love sitting down and having a chat and talking this crazy, insane competition that is the VFL and VFLW.
Oh, I absolutely love it, Donnie, and yeah, look forward to doing it once again in a couple of weeks. Uh, I'll be watching a little bit. I'll be getting up at crazy hours just like you to watch a little bit of the Socceroos over the next month. Hopefully
Yep. Oh, it'll definitely
they can
go ahead.
uh, they can, I suppose, even turn up. Yes, the Aussies will be fired up. Enjoy the World Cup, but don't forget about the footy because the best World Cup game will never be as good as the worst Aussie rules game. Enjoy the footy.
No, absolutely love it. That is a great way to end the show. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for this episode of Donnie's Disposals. Again, if you like what you were listening to, please like and subscribe. And again, we will have more footy coverage here very, very soon.